Hey there, fellow Americans scattered across the globe. Welcome to Americans Abroadcast, your one-stop shop for all things expat life. I'm Matthew Stevens, here with my co-host, Ashley Arreola, and let me tell you, living abroad isn't always sunshine and croissants.
Oui, Matt, and welcome, listeners. This podcast is designed to bring you unique perspectives from Americans living and thriving in Europe. I'm Ashley, and together with Matt, we'll explore the diverse experiences and stories of both fellow Americans and foreign experts who have ventured beyond their borders to give you their unique insights to help you navigate your own European adventure. So, in our inaugural episode, we'll be sharing how we ended up living in Vienna, where we've both lived for over a decade. My journey abroad has opened my eyes to new cultures and ways of life, and I'm excited to share these insights with you because we want to build a community where we can share experiences, provide support, and celebrate the incredible journeys of Americans living abroad.
Whether you're a seasoned expat or just dreaming of escaping the suburbs, buckle up, join us, Americans Abroadcast. It's going to be really fun, and the reason I think it's going to be fun is because you've actually lived through basically every expat experience that the typical expat is going to have, right?
I can just about attest to that, yeah.
Okay. Well, what was it that initially caused you to think, hey, I think I need to go abroad?
Well, actually, I was always someone that kind of had my head in the clouds, and a part of me always knew that and just felt that growing up in Northwest Indiana was not going to be where I spend the rest of my life. I was just always curious about what was out there. And I grew up in a family where we did not go on vacation. I was never on a plane. I was never even in a hotel. And I recall when I was a teenager, I had this passion for Paris. I think that every American girl kind of has this like dream to go to Paris and live there. And so it's just very influenced by the media and sitting in front of MTV and watching these women on the catwalks. And I just always had this obsession with living in France. And like my heart just told me that that's where I needed to be. And so I knew that after I had graduated high school that I would go on to study French because I just wanted to live in France. I could have been a cashier at a grocery store. I would have been happy as pie with that. So then when I was doing my first studies, doing my bachelor's, that was when Bush got elected the second time. And at that point, I mean, I had already had plans and was like, thinking about it, that was the plan. It was more of a dream, but I just knew that I did not identify with the society that I live in.
Mm-hmm. So there was a little bit of political motivation, but above all, it was really what you could absorb through the media about France. You thought this has got to be the place for me and I have to go explore.
Yes, absolutely. It was just kind of a desire of my heart, and I knew I needed to follow my heart. And my friends were studying communication and business and law, and none of that interested me.
Well, did you take French in high school?
I did, yeah.
Did y'all have French exchange students in your high school?
We had French and German and Austrian.
Were you friends with them?
Yes, I was my first love was a German foreign exchange student. And
not French, but a German dude.
Not French, but a German, guy. We were in a long distance relationship for 5 years because he was so in love with the States and I was like so in love with Europe. Yeah. And having this connection amongst each other also allowed us to keep this connection on the other side of the pond.
Okay.
So when I graduated college, I ended up majoring in both French and German for reasons stated.
I thought you were just a French major, but you did both.
Well, I decided halfway through that I may as well tag on the German as well because my first boyfriend's family was from the former DDR. Yep. And so they didn't grow up speaking English. They just spoke Russian as a second language. And so in order to communicate, I started to learn German, which is very, very difficult in the beginning.
You're learning it in college, but not in an immersive environment, rather just in the U.S.?
Correct. Yeah, I basically, learned 2 foreign languages.
That's hard.
Yeah, in a classroom. Yeah.
You must have been a good student.
I was president of my French club and I was very involved, but I was also, prior to making the official move in 2008, I would spend my summers in Europe. So I was doing, going to language schools in Germany, So I would spend, 2 to 3 months, but then you have your 90-day cap and then you have to go back. I was fortunate enough to be, part of a university that had lots of exchanges going back and forth. Even when the French students were in France while I was in Germany doing my stints, I would go and visit them also. So I was, I'm so fortunate and so thankful, and I will forever be thankful to my university professors, because they were foreign language and culture professors in the United States, but they also shared this passion for world languages and cultures.
Yeah.
And they understood me. And I felt it was the first time in my life where I really felt understood. Like there's something else other than where we're at and these neighborhoods and having a big house and living in a certain neighborhood and driving a certain car. I just felt like this would never be fulfilling to me. The biggest house, the nicest car, a rich husband, a couple kids, like that just would not have done it for me, because I was just curious about what else was out there. And so after I finished my bachelor's, it just made sense to get my master's in Europe.
Right. So you were experienced. It wasn't you knew you weren't going to have culture shock moving abroad by that point, because you'd already done exchange program visits in the summers, essentially.
Yes. And so it was actually really good leeway to go in, because you would spend, 3 months on Germany and then have to go back. So I just had this, how they say in German, this Fernweh, so I was like always missing, Germany while I was in the States. And I also had a very multicultural experience within Indiana. So while I was studying both French and German, I was working at a fine dining Italian restaurant and learning a bit of Italian at the same time with a typical mama that never really learned English properly.
I see.
And I was giving tours at, it was called the Athenaeum. It used to be called Das Deutsche Haus. And so it was a house in Indianapolis that was founded by German immigrants. Kurt Vonnegut's father is amongst one of the original founders.
Oh, wow.
From, Indianapolis.
Uh-huh.
The building still stands. And it belongs to the city. And so I would volunteer there, coordinate with local schools, and they would have field trips where the kids would come in and we would teach them about German culture. And so even though I was still in the States, I was still embracing this Western European culture as well, whether it be French or German or Italian.
Okay. At what point did you decide, I'm going to try to stick it out beyond just getting a degree here?
I knew that I could not return. I knew that was not an option.
So once you were here, you're like, I'm staying.
Absolutely. So I was really looking for a city where I could stay for a while. And so I had wonderful experiences in Germany. I felt like, okay, I took this country off the box. Let's see what else is out there. And then I had spent some time in France. However, I was not a member of a program, and because it wasn't official and I was just kind of going about it a bit lackadaisically, it didn't work out so well. So I had to escape and flee from France and ended up in Vienna a bit coincidentally. Mm-hmm. So it was never my plan actually to come to Vienna. And once I arrived, I fell in love with the city completely. I just felt so safe, and I thought, it's romantic like Paris, but it's safe like Germany. Vienna has something about it. Yes, I also feel like it was a bit of fate that played a role, because it was never my plan to be here, even though I was looking for a place to live. And so once I found out how cheap it is to study, because the tuition is incredibly inexpensive, how cheap the rent was, because in comparison to large cities like Paris and London, obviously the rent was fairly cheap, and also the beer and wine.
Yeah, it is cheap. If you drink local, it's cheap. Yeah. Well, we've seen some changes in the time that we've been here. Obviously there's a war in Ukraine right now, so we see a lot of Ukrainian immigrants here. And in 2015, 2016, I think we saw the first big flooding of refugees from the war in Syria coming here. Mm-hmm. In fact, right outside where we are recording right now on the Donau Canal, I can remember seeing an entire family of refugees dropped off in a van into this park right here on the canal. And they just drove off. They had laid blankets out in the park as if they were it was in the summer, they were just going to sleep in the park right there where they got dropped off. And very quickly someone came and picked them up from social services or something
I
like
imagine,
that.
yeah.
But now I think since 2016 and since Trump was elected, there has been a bit of a trend for Americans to move abroad. The large majority of them want to move to the EU, although there were a lot moving to Mexico, and especially for retirees. But I think the trend for expats coming to the EU is not necessarily retirees.
Yes, amongst other groups. That's definitely a group that is amongst them. I think people are realizing also that there's something else out there. So I feel like somehow, for whatever reason, I just kind of understood like, not every other country in the world must, have to save so much to, in case they get injured or
Right.
is in so much debt or pay so much for university. And I think that especially like you mentioned, after Trump was elected and a lot of people went on the streets, I felt like finally Americans are protesting. They're out on the streets and, they're fighting, for healthcare and for equal rights. And with this, generation, I feel like as a millennial, we're not the young ones anymore. So who's after the millennials? It's that Gen Z, right?
I forget. It's just a big mishmash, and it's all just made up in the first. These are made up labels in the first place. But I have seen quite a few students at TU Wien and University of Vienna and especially Webster University, that are American. And I think a lot of Americans don't know that at the graduate level, almost all the courses are in English. At least at the TU Wien they were. I know Webster, that's
at the VU as well.
And VU. I think if more students knew that they could get their graduate degree at such a discount in English in Europe, I think a lot of students would choose to do it.
And in addition, yes, that was one of the bonuses of getting my master's here. I was obviously already speaking German, so I had one leg up, but I had healthcare. And in the beginning, in 2008, I only paid $25 a month for the same healthcare that I have right now. I have the same doctors today after living and working here for over 15 years than I did that first year that I was here.
Wow. Man, I've gone through quite a few doctors in the 13 years I've been here. I've bounced around. But yeah.
And so obviously I pay a lot more for that now, or my employer pays a lot more, but that's the whole part of the system of the universal health care.
Yeah.
And now I think for students that doubled then to 50 and now it's maybe at 60 for €60 a month. I mean, the tuition is only a few hundred a year and then you get health care on top of that. So I'm not sure how much of a secret it is for American students. Well, should I turn the tables on you? Because I did not ask, I'd take the opportunity to ask you actually what your initial motivation was to move abroad.
My initial motivation to move abroad, the very first time I ever went abroad, not counting Mexico, because I'm from Texas. So technically the first time I went abroad was like a road trip. You just drive down to Big Bend, and then there's the Rio Grande at the southern tip of the Big Bend. But that doesn't really count. I think my first motivation to go abroad was feeling like I was a foreigner in my own hometown.
That's how you felt back in Austin, Texas?
Yeah. Just did not fit in. Someone I was dating at the time had done a study abroad, I think high school and college. And she said, Matt, just leave the country. You really need to leave the country. You'll be much happier out there rather than in here. So I took her word for it. And then my best friend told me what his uncle had done. And I took his word for it that was a good idea. And I ended up going abroad based on the recommendation, essentially, of friends that said, you should try it. You're going to have a great time if you do it. And they were right. And that led to me living in Germany for a couple of years where I learned German. But then I really did want to finish my degree in the U.S. So I went back to the U.S. and finished my degree. In the course of that period of time, I met some Viennese folks, numerous folks from Vienna. So Austin has a really vibrant meetup culture. Mm-hmm. And so to keep up my German, I was always going to the German language meetup, which was, I would almost say, about 60-40 Germans and Austrians. No Swiss that I can remember, but quite a healthy group of Austrians.
Okay, no, that's actually surprising to me, but yeah. That's really I love those meetups. I also, yes, you just do the French meetups, in Indianapolis.
It definitely helped. And then through my friendships at that meetup group, I was invited to come here for the holidays, for Christmas. Boy, if you want someone to move to Vienna, invite them to Vienna for Christmas. It is very persuasive. The Christmas markets are nice. The weather, if you're from Texas, the weather's nice. To see a little bit of snow.
Not too much. I'm from Chicago. There's not too much snow.
It's never like that's almost never like Chicago here. And they were just very hospitable, wonderful people, and they still are friends to this day. The vibe is very different in Vienna from what it was like in Hamburg. People are cool in Hamburg, as in like they're interesting and well educated, but there is a funky sort of hominess to folks in Vienna. In fact, Vienna's phrase or catchphrase is a little bit like Austin's, which is Vienna is different. And Austin's catchphrase is keep Austin weird.
Okay.
I'm not sure how true it is in Austin these days and how much of that is just marketing BS. But I think that for Vienna, the thing that makes Vienna appealing to this day is that they don't overdo it by overselling that Vienna is different. Wien ist anders. They don't work at marketing themselves as being anders, you know? There's no TV show you can watch where you can see it really pushed and advertised in the show. Mm-hmm. Whereas there have now been quite a few reality TV shows in Austin that are almost all thematically based on the idea that isn't this a funky, weird place and you can just be your own person? Whereas you see really odd folks in Vienna.
Definitely, yeah. Daily basis.
But they're not, but we don't market the city as that. They market the city as being the home of Strauss and Mozart and Beethoven and blah, 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 blah. And that's what brings in a lot of tourism. But that's not what brings people really to live in Vienna. People live in Vienna because it's so livable.
The most livable city in the world.
For someone from Texas, one of my big motivators was I can walk my dog down the street and the street won't burn her paws, which is not the case in Texas. And I can take that same dog into a restaurant and sit down and have a meal. And I can take that dog on the tram. In summary, I just enjoyed myself. I knew the European lifestyle was a slower pace. It was very comfortable. Public transportation for me was a very big deal. Just the stress of moving through Austin traffic got old, very quickly. Once I had visited during the holidays, I felt pretty confident this was the right place for me. Now I'm married, I've got a kid, and I really love it here. It's really my story.
Well, it really sounds like you're loving life here and enjoying your quality of life.
And also subscribe to our newsletter via our website at blog.americansabroadcast.com. Next time, we will have a discussion with an expert on going to grad school in the EU with tons of helpful information you will want to know if you are interested in furthering your education outside the US. So until next time, keep exploring, keep adventuring, and keep making the most of your life abroad.